Hi, my name's Mike. I fly a Boeing 787 for a major airline in the United States. Recently, the Air India crash, Flight 171, which occurred on June the 12th of this year, has raised a lot of questions and very few answers at this point. What were the possibilities? And as the news unfolded, different things came out. First, it was the possibility of a set flap setting, which was quickly disproved. Then there was evidence of a dual engine failure because of the ram air turbine, which deploys when you have a dual engine failure, and that was brought to light. As I looked into the aircraft accident, my question was, where was the airplane going? The reason I wondered about that was because of the flight time. Air India operates under regulations that are governed by its country. We are governed by the FAA here in the United States. Not sure what their rules and regulations are. It could very possibly be that it only required 2 pilots to make that flight. So when the preliminary report came out, when I heard the first report, I was waiting to hear the number of pilots that were on the flight deck, and it was said that there were only 2 pilots. When you read through the report, I believe it's on page 14, they paraphrase what happened in the cockpit. In the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, "Why did he cut off?" The other pilot responded that he did not do so. There's no quotes, there's no association to who said what, which would have been very easy to discern. That's the first red flag that I noticed. Why did they not break down from the time that they got on the flight deck and started talking about the flight right up until the end, with timestamps and explaining all that, or sharing all that went on between the 2 pilots. So when I heard this report, I played it back and I listened again and again. I heard in the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other pilot, "Why did he cut off?" The other pilot responded that he did not do so. This is what caught my ear. In the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other pilot, comma, and there's no comma here, "Why did he cut off?" When I heard that, I thought, my goodness, if there were 2 pilots in the cockpit, one would not say to the other one, why did he cut off? Why would you look at your partner and say, "Why did he cut off?" You would say, "Why did you cut off?" So maybe it was a complete paraphrase, or maybe it was part of what was said. So that may have occurred. A jump seater may have come on board, was given a seat in the back, and then ended up in the cockpit. Here's another scenario that's a possibility. Let's say this scenario, there was an Air India pilot that was going to Gatwick for whatever reason, and he's flying on his company passes and he's in the back, and possibly he could have come up to the flight deck and introduced himself, which is very common, and said, "Hey, Captain, I'm on a different airplane. I'm thinking about transitioning to the 787. How would you feel if here's my ID, here's all my credentials. Would it be okay if I sat in the flight deck and just observe for the takeoff and maybe the landing, and then I'll go back to my seat for the 7 hours, the bulk of the flight?" Captain could have very easily said, "Yeah, that's not a problem." At that point in time, there would have been necessarily no record of a jump seater, officially jump seater, boarding the airplane to possibly take the jump seat. And if that's the case, then maybe there was a pilot that's the 3rd pilot in the cockpit. So let's take a look at the inside of the cockpit. This is the cockpit of a Boeing 787, the captain's seat, the first officer's seat. The jump seat that's in the middle. that jump seat is sort of offset behind the first officer. If a jump seater is there in this particular airplane, most likely they're going to sit in this seat. If you look at the bottom here, this seat has tracks. This seat pulls up close to this, what's called the pedestal. So a working crew member, when he's in this seat and we're getting ready to taxi, will pull this seat forward and get as close to the pedestal so that they can lean in and observe. You're also within reach, of course, of the controls and of those two fuel control switches. So my question then becomes, why is the voice recorder not transcribed verbatim, second by second, voice by voice during this phase of flight? The whole thing, from the time the door gets shut and we find out, hey, there's 3 voices here. Were there? I don't know. Nobody knows. The preliminary report only says that there were 2 pilots on board, but for the first time that I can remember, that they are not releasing the cockpit voice recorder. That would tell us clearly what went on. So what are the chances of this third pilot being there? Unknown. Until you listen to the voice recorder. That's all that would take. And then this would be a moot point. If we find out there's a third pilot that has not been spoken about, most likely the rest of the story is going to be told. Well, let's think about what happened in the Air Alaska flight a couple of years ago, where a commuting Air Alaska pilot sitting in the jump seat claims he was dreaming and reached up and pulled the fire system knobs that if he would have continued to turn, would have shut the fuel off to the engines and they would have flamed out. Pilot saw what he was doing, somehow stopped him. They called for the flight attendant, opened the door, they got him out, they diverted and landed, and then began that investigation. Is this the case that somebody was sitting in the seat and had a moment, just a delusional moment, where they reached up and shut the fuel control switches off to this airplane and caused this accident? And why is the voice recorder not released? That's my question. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I appreciate you taking the time and listening. Thanks.